Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the 21st SF Doc Fest. The festival will be held from June 1st to June 12th at the Historic Roxy Theater, as well as online. You've just watched a collection of short films that will be screening along with some other feature films, both in person at the Roxy Theater as well as online. I want to say a huge thank you and welcome to our filmmakers, and we'll just give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. And we'll start off with Justine and Emily. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us.
I'm Emily. I'm the producer and the cinematographer for Food Broker, Doris.
And I'm the director and editor of Food Broker, Doris, Justine.
Thank you so much. Hi, Sarah. Welcome.
Hello, so good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm actually not the filmmaker. I'm the subject of the film, The Space Between Us. My name is Sarah Crowell, dancer choreography, based out of Oakland, California. Super happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, Latisse. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, my name is Latisse Brown, and my film is the short documentary Turfin.
Awesome. Thank you. And hi, Damien.
Hi, my name is Damien McDuffie. My film is Into the Archives, Black Panthers in Augmented Reality. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so amazed and honored to get to highlight the stories that are presented in your films. So glad that we get to come together and share these stories. Just to kind of kick things off, let's talk about kind of the genesis of the film. How did you find the work or come to be involved in it? What was that kind of spark moment that brought the stories to the screen? And we'll kick off with you, Damien.
Oh, thank you. This is actually one of two of my first films. And my background, I'm a creative technologist and a digital archivist. And a lot of the work that I've done kind of in the last few years has been figuring out ways how to make kind of physical archives and physical objects digital in different ways. And with that, I kind of work with Billy X and his archive. He has an extensive archive of Black Panther newspapers, as everybody saw. And what I like to do is try to figure out ways to kind of add digital media that might be a little scarce or a little bit more precious, and figure out ways to add augmented reality to it. So in our film, it really kind of came together a little bit of like happenstance. It's just kind of like a fusion of a lot of different interests, and then kind of enough time to kind of formulate a story. So a lot of what it's in my films are things that I kind of would be doing without the cameras, and then just, now we have some visuals.
I mean, yes, his collection is so breathtaking. Just the amount of ephemera that really highlights and documents such an important portion of our history for the Bay Area, but also for like kind of revolutionary stance in general. So thank you so much for bringing that to the screen. Latisse, hi. Can you talk about your film and kind of how you found the subject matter and brought everything together?
So I was inspired to do Turfin because I grew up during the hyphy movement era. And I always loved watching the dancers on the trains and at the parties. And I hadn't seen anything that was, I guess, kind of capturing that history and telling the story of why people do it. And initially it was a class project, and I decided to be brave and submit it to some festivals. And yeah, it was just more about just capturing turf dancing in its own element and giving those dancers a chance to tell their story.
Thank you so much. And I feel like you have the content and the subtext that you really do a beautiful job of telling their story, but also capturing a snapshot of the community in a state of transition, and kind of what it means for folks to have this and come together through like the movement of their bodies, but also the movement within the community. It's really, really gorgeous. Thank you so much. Which leads us to Sarah, which I mean, sometimes Zoom just places people or you all join in a way that like is just perfect. Which I will say, going from Turfin to the space between us, Sarah, how did you come to conceive this? I mean, it's very much so a dialogue through movement, and it's done in a really moving way. So how did that all come together for you?
Yeah, actually, I'm not the filmmaker. I'm the one of the dancers in the film, and Gabriel Diamond, who's the filmmaker, he and I had actually danced together in conscious dance communities for many years, but we had never spoken. And so I'd been on a dance floor with him, and then he called me, and I had just left an organization that I ran for 30 years called Destiny Arts Center in Oakland. And so I had time to do a project, which was new because I'd been the artistic director of an organization, a nonprofit, youth run organization. So it was a lot. And he called me and said, I'm doing this project. I want it to be two dancers um, who are different from each other. And I want them to have a really intimate conversation. And it was a perfect time for me because I had left this organization. I felt very cracked open as a human being anyway. And I'm willing to have, as a 57-year-old woman now, I'm willing to have more vulnerable conversations that I used to. I did work on other young, like on people, dancers, actors, and had them tell vulnerable stories. And I felt like it was important that I model that and that I continue to evolve as an artist. So he said, I'm going to ask you some vulnerable questions. I'm going to have you have conversation with the white man, and we'll go from there. And he said, do you want me to tell you the questions? I said, no, I want to just be surprised. I want to be present. I want to be in the moment, and I want to be willing to share what it is that comes for me in that moment. And we're both dancers. I actually knew Keith Hennessy, who was the other dancer that I was working with for many years. And Gabe Diamond, he called me. He said, I want you to do an audition, Sarah. I feel embarrassed doing that because you're an established artist in the Bay Area. I was like, no, I love to be auditioned. And so I filmed myself on Zoom he said, film yourself as if you're having a conversation with somebody. So I was like, okay, about something that you're upset about, but that you want to be vulnerable about. So I said, okay, I'm going to have a conversation with someone who didn't greet me in the street. And that happens to me a lot. Like I'm walking down, and it's often white folks who don't say hello to me. I'm the only person on the street with them, and they're not saying hello, just greeting me, acknowledging my presence. So I had a conversation with that person, but it was just my Zoom screen. And I felt so connected to that topic that I cried talking to myself or somebody else on the screen. And then I danced it. And he was like, well, I got to work with this woman right here. Because I was like cracked open. So the conversation was really intense. I know you all just saw it. And I watched it just before this so that I could really feel connected to the piece again. And I'll leave it there. But I think Gabe Diamond is a brilliant filmmaker. He does films that tap into people's humanity and stretch them out of their comfort zones.
It's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Justine and Emily, how did you find Doris? What brought you to tell her story?
Well, we went to the same school. We went to USC together, and this film is actually made by 3 people. Our one more producer is currently sick with COVID, so she couldn't join us. But yeah, we all went to the same school, and Emily and I have worked on a documentary before, and a professor approached us with the suggestion of filming Jerry Chan, who's actually Doris's partner in Doris Cares. And he suggested that we might be able to help them. So we went to film their promotional film in the beginning. But as soon as we learned who Doris is and how she lives her life, we realized a promotional film isn't gonna do it. So we decided to make a documentary about her.
Awesome. And I'm going to turn this around. I think, especially with documentary filmmaking, there's a lot of trust and intimacy between the filmmakers and their subjects. And so, can you, Justine, and Emily kind of talk about the way you approached working with Doris and your approach to portraying her on the screen?
Doris was actually, she was very open about what she does, and she is very honest about her situation, but it was a little bit hard for her to open up about her childhood or her family situation or how she got to where she was. And that happened because we filmed over a year. We went to see her time to time, and we just call her sometimes and we go see her. We give her some things and help her out. We go talk to her friends or family members, but it just happened gradually. And eventually, towards the end of the shooting, we just went like it's another shooting, and she opened up suddenly like magic, and she started to talk about her childhood and her family and what she really aspires to. So that really built the film, the core of the film.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sarah, we're going to turn this on you. Obviously, through the work that Gabriel's put forth, there is obviously such a spirit of collaboration, and with that does come a lot of trust. So can you speak to kind of the ways that you approach this as a subject, but also like in a lot of ways as a creator, because you are generating this content? There's no script, there's no this and that, but it is a performative act. Can you kind of talk about what that process was like for you to kind of open yourself up to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. I think what was interesting, I mean, we filmed it before vaccines existed. So we were in a dance studio. We like tested for COVID like the day before, got results, and then all of the crew were masked and 6 feet apart. So, but the camera woman, who's incredible, she was masked, but she was also, everybody tested negative. So there was already this vulnerability and this trust that we had to have just to land into the room with each other. And then for me, I talk about in the film that I don't believe in safe space, I believe in brave space. And as a Black woman, as a queer woman, I talk about brave space a lot, and I facilitated a lot of spaces with young people. And so for me, it's like, what does that actually mean? It means I'm willing to enter into a space that is created well. So if I walked into that space and I was like, I'm not feeling it, I would go, I'm going to step away. But I knew that that the moment I walked in on an energetic level, I knew that it was a good container. I felt that Gabriel Diamond, who's the filmmaker, holds this gorgeous space. He recognizes as a white male filmmaker that that he doesn't know everything. He just asks questions and he's willing to listen. I felt like I was in the living room having a conversation with friends. That's the way he created the space. And then the camera woman would get on the ground with me. When I was dancing, she would be like really next to me. I felt that we were dancing together. I imagine, Latisse, when you were doing Turfin, like how like you have to be with the dancers, you have to be connected to them. I felt like the camera person I was just having a duet with her, which felt so much fun. And so immediately I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable because I've asked those same questions of people in art making processes. So like, who are you? What's required for you to feel safe? Um, and it's oftentimes that I'm the listener. So it's really interesting to be on the other side of it. And I felt like it was important. And I also love Keith, the choreographer that I was working with, the dancer. He came to every one of my original productions that I choreographed and produced and directed with a whole team of people for like 20 years. He was always at every single show. There's something as a performer when you're doing original work that's about you and about what you're passionate about. If people arrive at that space, I feel like they know me, even though we haven't really had that deep of a conversation before, but he saw my work. So he understood it, and so had Gabriel. So that that connection, that way of interweaving our relationships, I think made it feel safe for me and made me trust, at least made me willing to be brave.
Love that. Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful and elegant way to kind of sum up the process. So thank you. Doris, how did you find your subjects? How did you go about engendering their trust to let you kind of come in behind the veil?
All of the dancers were friends of a friend, and I just reached out to people I remembered that danced. And, I was like, hey, do you still turf dance? Do you know any turf dancers? And then I got a couple of people that were interested. I shared with them some of my past work, and I guess they just trusted my word. The woman dancer, I actually met her on the BART headed to a shoot with one of the dancers. And I saw her and her team practicing, and I was like, hey, I'm shooting this documentary. Would you want to be involved? I have no women. I would love to have at least one woman a part of this. And she was down and open, and we met at a space that she likes to practice at. And yeah, that's how it went down.
That's awesome. Are you still in contact with them?
Yeah, we all follow each other on social media.
That's awesome. Forming community. So beautiful. Thank you. Damien, how about you? Like, obviously you work in the archival space, but how did you like come upon Billy and like gain access to like what is just like an insane treasure trove of ephemera?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that for anybody who's into archiving, like there's an aspiration to have or to archive as much kind of like vivid history as he has been able to do. And I think a lot of it starts with just my interest in my neighborhood in West Oakland. I grew up in the Acorn Projects around kind of like there in the lower bottoms. And I just remember when I was growing up early in the 90s, a lot of what I could read, what I knew about the history of my neighborhood, just had to do with specifically the Black Panthers, but not really knowing what that meant, and also not being able to imagine, something that has such a large impact on the world happening in the place where I was looking around, especially with a lot of craziness going on around me. So I think one just comes from like my interest there, and I've always just tried to find different ways where I can kind of support elders in the community, support different programs, and just build, create a placemaking in the way that they have in the past. And it's actually taken a little bit of time to be able to get to visit Billy at his home and actually see some of the archives. We've probably been working together for maybe like 1 or 2 years before I actually went in there with the camera. And it all kind of came together more so we were preparing for the 55th anniversary of the Black Panther Party. And I do a lot of kind of like volunteering and production and organizing and trying to be his feet on the ground since he's in Sacramento, I'm in Oakland. And I think out of my love of archiving, I just kind of understood that a lot of what we were doing should be documented in some kind of way. And then if you watch the film, I'm a journalist as well as a writer. And a lot of it there's no journalism happening. It's really just kind of like me standing there with Billy as he kind of tells me the history of almost everything. And I think it just works because of my curiosity and my love of history and archives. And these are some of the same things that I've done with my grandmother and my great aunts and my great grandmothers and all of these other people throughout the country. And I think the other part is having a good partner that's ready to kind of like make it happen. So Theo Shear, who's the videographer as well as the editor for our film, just being kind of like ready to go when necessary. And that just kind of takes chemistry, and that just takes kind of being able to be flexible for other people's schedule. And I think that that's like a large part of it. And one other thing just about kind of the trust, I think it's also on Billy's side. He just started actually letting people in maybe a year before I got in there, maybe a couple months before. And it's not just to kind of like have people go through there, but also understanding the need for researchers and students and people to be able to have access to a lot of material that most people don't. Some universities don't as well. So I think it's, a great, it's really just about him wanting to do what he's always done. It's kind of like educate folks, and he wants to do that with me, and that's just like what everybody's witnessing in the film. Yeah.
It's so amazing, and it really does come through. There's the notion that the history isn't often written by those who would benefit from knowing the real history. So having these narratives being out there for people to see that these conversations are happening, that this activism has been happening for so long, that these communities exist, is so important. And I think that's why we're so lucky to get to share your stories with the festival and the world. So thank you all so much for coming out and being a part of this, and for your work and your continued work. It's so important that we get to have this in the cultural dialogue. So thank you all so much. Thanks to our audience.
Yeah.